Hello peoples of the internet, it's Mo, and I kind of bought a whole bunch of books. Also, my camera broke last week, so I went out and bought a new camera too, so this is a slightly new videoing experience for me, so hopefully you guys can notice a slight difference in quality, because this is a little bit of a nicer camera than my last one was. But this video is not about the camera, this video is about the fact that I kind of bought more books than I should have within the past month. These are not from a single shopping trip, this was multiple trips that I took, and after a while they all kind of added up, and I figured I should probably haul them for you guys. So, I should maybe get this stack into some sort of order. So I'm going to start out with the two books that I got that are literary fiction. The first of which is this one here. This is Ken Follett's World Without End. This is kind of a sequel to The Pillars of the Earth, which I just read and really liked. It's only kind of a sequel in that it takes place 200 years after the first one, so it doesn't actually share characters, although I think the characters in this book are descended from the characters in the first book. So anyway, I've heard good things about this one and do plan on picking it up sometime soon here, or at least sometime. Next one that I picked up was Patrick O'Brian's Master and Commander, because obviously I've heard about this series but haven't actually read it yet, and I think it's a fairly long series, but this is the first book, and I tend to like naval and nautical types of stories, so planning on picking this up at some point. The next book I bought was actually, shocker, non-fiction, which I never do, so hopefully I get to this, you know, before 3 years from now or something. But this is The Code Book, and the subtitle is The Science and Secrecy of Secrecy from Ancient Egypt to Quantum Cryptography. And it is by Simon Singe, so all about codes and cryptography and stuff, which is a subject that I find interesting and would like to read more about. So there's that one. And we're gonna move on to fantasy. So I picked up 3 fantasy books recently. Everything that I bought, everything? Yes. All of these were used. So I didn't spend a ton of money on the books, which makes me feel slightly better about the fact that I bought lots of them. But anyway, tangent. Moving on. Fantasy books. I picked up this one, which is actually a replacement copy. This is Talking to Dragons by Patricia C. Reedy. This is the 4th book in a middle grade series, which I have previously read and owned, but I lost my copy of this one, so when I saw it at the used bookstore, I figured I ought to pick it up and replace mine. The next thing that I bought was The Broken Sword by Poul Anderson. I've heard good things about this. Didn't really know much about it other than that it's fairly early fantasy, and as you can see I started it already. I'm like 20 pages in or something, so hopefully I'll be finishing this sometime soon. And the last fantasy book on this list is this one right here. It's Prince of Anwin, I think is how you pronounce it, and this is the first book in Evangeline Walton's I can't say this word, Mabinogion series. Tell me how to say that word, or if I'm saying it right or wrong or stuff. But I've heard good things about this. I believe it's a tetralogy, so there should be 4 books. They only had the first book at the used bookstore, so hopefully I can find the other ones if I end up liking this. But yeah, those are the fantasy books on my list. Moving on. There are 4 science fiction books on this list. The first one I have already read, so it's not going on my TBR, and that is this one, City by Clifford D. Simak. I read this a couple of years ago, and it actually, I believe, made my best books of the year video, so I will link that one below if you would like to hear me talk about it a little more. It's a collection of short stories that involves robots and dogs and other things, and I really liked it and wanted a physical copy, so that one's being added to my shelf. The next one has quite the cover illustration, and this is Callahan's Crosstime Saloon by Spider Robinson. I had heard about this one a while back and been interested, but I don't really remember what it's about. at all. It might be short stories, I think. I'm not really sure. You'll find out when I read it. The next thing I picked up was The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers. This is a science fiction time travel story, and I think it involves people going back to the Victorian era and meeting Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who I like as a poet. So that's basically all I know about this one, but I like me a good time travel book, so hopefully I end up enjoying this. And the last science fiction book on this list is The Snow Queen by Joan Divinge. This is not my favorite cover for this. There's one that's just absolutely gorgeous. I'll put a picture up here because you guys should see it because it's beautiful. But this is not a bad cover necessarily, and I've been wanting to read this. It's a science fiction novel which I think draws a little bit from the fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, but isn't like a retelling of it. I don't really know much else about it except that it has good reviews, but got that. So the rest of the books I bought are all poetry, which I haven't bought in a while, but I'm super excited about. I actually already started the first one. And the first one is just one of these skinny little Dover Thrift editions of John Donne poems. I was hoping to get something a little bit more comprehensive, but they didn't have any nice like hardcover things of John Donne where I was shopping at, so I will wait and buy some of his another time. But this way I'm able to get to reading some of them, and I've read a few already. I'm in there, so this should only take me a couple of days to get through, although I imagine I will read it multiple times because John Donne was an Elizabethan poet, so the language is a little bit more, I feel like I just need to spend a little bit more time with it than I do with some of the others. The next one I picked up was this skinny little volume. This is 3 narrative poems, and it's kind of like a critical edition, I guess, so it's got introduction and like talks about each of the authors, and then also it has illustrations for each of the poems in here. So the 3 poems that are included are The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is Samuel Taylor Coleridge and is one of my favorite poems. Really enjoy that one. It's a story about sailors and there's a curse and all sorts of like sort of semi-fantasy horror things that happen. And then the next poem in here is by Arnold, and it is Sohrab and Rustum, which I have not read in a long time, but here you see more of the nice little illustrations. And if I remember correctly, it is mostly about a duel that is fought between the 2 title characters. And then the last poem is by Tennyson, but I have not read it yet. I don't remember what it's called. Enoch Arden. So I will be reading that one sometime soon because it's Tennyson and it's in here and I haven't read it, and that way I can kind of check this book off my list too. But I wanted to get it even though I'd already read 2 of the poems because it's a nice little travel size, so I can take it with me if I'm wanting to reread them on a trip or something. Moving on, I have a collection of poems by Lord Byron in this nice little green volume. These are, unfortunately, only his love poems. They don't have any of the other ones, like, you know, more adventure-y ones in here, which tend to be the kind that I prefer, but still, I like Byron, and, you know, sometimes you're in the mood for that. So, last book in this haul is this one. This is Christ in Poetry. It's an anthology of all sorts of poems from different eras about Christ and just basically Christian-themed poems. I've read some poems that would fall into this category, which are probably in here, and I'm sure there are tons that I have not. So I look forward to dipping into this and seeing what I think of it. So those were all the books that I bought recently. Now I can take them off of my haul pile and stick them in my shelves and stuff, which should be fun. Let me know if you guys have read any of these, what you thought of them, and yeah, let's chat down in the comments about it. I will be seeing you guys again next time, and until then, happy reading!